I'm Natalia.
I'm Sophia.
I'm Nicoletta.
I'm Aisha.
And I'm Tony.
And our project is on co-cultures and stereotypes in America today.
What are co-cultures? A co-culture is a group whose values, beliefs, or behaviors set it apart from the larger group, which it is a part of and with which it shares many similarities.
Stereotypes, as we know, are a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person or thing. The first co-culture we're going to be talking about is senior citizens in America, which are numbered at 47.8 million as of today, specifically over the age of 65. This covers almost 50% of our population, and this number has grown by 1.6 million since 2014, and the projected number of these people by the year 2060 is projected to reach 98.2 million. Just to give you perspective, that's 1 in every 4 Americans. So the current income of senior citizens is about $38,515, and that's $22,857 lower than the average American. So you can imagine how low that is. The poverty rate of these people is about 13.7%. That's 6.5 million people in 2015. If we exclude the earnings from Social Security, then this would more than triple the poverty rate for senior citizens. As we know, a lot of our elderly are veterans, 9.3 million to be exact. They've served our nation and have come back and should be given more than they already are. Some of the common problems elderly face now is physical and mental illness, high healthcare costs, financial security, bereavement, social isolation, and loneliness, as well as elder abuse. Here's an example of a case of elder abuse. This is a case study of a video of a few teenagers beating up an elderly man.
Suspects on Albemarle Street surrounding a 59-year-old Baltimore police lab technician, hitting him, knocking him to the ground, and stomping on his head.
It didn't really have a motive. It was more of a, let's say, showing off type of situation. And this doesn't happen, once in a while. This happens often. A lot of elder abuse is seen in America today. Some of the stereotypes associated with the elderly are that they're senile, sickly, unattractive, greedy, cranky, and childlike. So these stereotypes can be gotten rid of, but it's going to be hard because stereotypes are learned at a very young age, and they're based on our interactions with the elderly people, as well as how our parents, family members, and other relatives view them. And also the media portrays them in a certain way, which is very hard to escape because media is all around us.
Another co-culture is deaf individuals in America. More than 90% of deaf children are born to hearing parents. That means that you and your significant other that are hearing could actually end up having a child that is deaf or becomes deaf later on. Approximately 15% of American adults aged 18 and over report of some trouble hearing. 1 in 20 Americans are deaf or will become deaf later on in life. That means just because you weren't born deaf doesn't mean that you won't become deaf later on. ASL, as many of us know, stands for American Sign Language, which is a visual language. With signing, the brain processes linguistic information through the eyes. The shape, placement, and movement of the hands, as well as facial expressions and body movements, all play an important part in this form of communication. So it's a way for people who are deaf to communicate with each other, and also someone who's deaf to communicate with someone who's hearing. So it's a better way of communication rather than just reading lips or pointing to things. Stereotypes in the deaf community. Deaf people cannot drive. That's not true because many deaf people are able to drive perfectly fine. All deaf people can lip read very well. That's not true because, like I said before, some people who are deaf become deaf later on in life. So they're actually used to hearing sound when they speak. So opposed to someone who was born deaf, they might not be as good as reading the lips. So that's just something to take into consideration. Another is deaf people can only get low-paying jobs because they cannot speak, which isn't true because nowadays a deaf person can get any job they want as long as they have an interpreter. And if they don't feel comfortable speaking or communicating with hearing people because it might be awkward, They could actually get like a cubicle job or work at a computer where they don't have to really speak to anyone, and with the right education and degree, you could get decent money out of it. And the last one, all deaf people cannot speak at all. That's not true because there's different levels of being deaf. So some deaf people could actually speak and say a couple words or phrases, and they can actually hear some sounds. So it's kind of ignorant to just think all deaf people cannot speak. Hearing Americans need to be more aware. A person that is hearing should not be ignorant, and Americans need more patience. If we see someone on the street that's deaf, we should not just disregard them because we're busy and we have somewhere else to be, but we should put ourselves in their shoes and think about what's going on in their life and take the time to maybe help them if they need it. The deaf community is a co-culture that people need to be aware of. When we hear co-culture, sometimes we think of it demographically or racially, but that's not the case. The deaf community is a co-culture as well. You never know if your future children could be deaf, and children and adults get ridiculed. So like I said before, you never know if your own child could get deaf, you yourself, a family member, a loved one. So it's always important to not be ignorant and to always be kind, especially to a disabled person. And they get ridiculed, they get bullied, they probably had a bad day. You don't know what happened, so it's always good to be kind. It can happen to anyone. Age is the strongest predictor of hearing loss among adults aged 20 to 69. That is a very large range to take into consideration, so it can literally happen to anyone at any time in their life. With the greatest amount of hearing loss in the 60 to 69 age group. We should treat the deaf population with more respect because they have to learn twice as hard as the typical American does. So essentially, they have to work twice as hard because they don't speak or they can't communicate as we can. They can't hear. So they have to work twice as hard in education, at the workplace, even their social lives. Things that we don't think is a stress to them. So instead of disregarding someone that's deaf, we should actually respect them. And it's something that they cannot change. It was something they were born with, and it's not their fault, so you should just be kind. Who is Helen Keller? Helen Keller was an American educator, advocate for the blind and deaf, and the co-founder of the ACLU. At the age of 2, she became blind and deaf through sickness. So we see here that she wasn't born deaf, but she became deaf later on. During her lifetime, she received many honors and recognition of her accomplishments.
So my co-culture group is the Democrats in America. And in America, there are 330 million American citizens, and of that number, 96 million of those are voters. The Democratic Party is one of the most popular parties in America. It's actually the most popular party. There are 42 million Democrats, and the Democrats take 45 out of the 100 seats in the Senate and 235 of the 435 seats in the House. And Democrats are known for their liberal viewpoints, whereas Republicans are known for their more conservative viewpoints. And of Republicans, there are 30 million Republicans as well as 24 million independents. So those are the three major parties in America. So as for the Democrat demographics, it is known that most Democrats reside in the East and West Coast. However, most Republicans reside in the Midwest and the South. The Democrats also reside in more populated urban areas, whereas the Republicans are in more suburban areas. So it's clear that their cultures are different, as one in an urban lifestyle would not have a similar lifestyle to someone in the suburban area. So this trend is universal even in deep red states such as Texas or dark blue states such as Massachusetts. Highly populous places are concentrated with more minorities who will vote Democrat. For the Democrat demographics, it's common to find the Democrats within the East and West Coast, whereas Republicans are more often found in the Midwest as well as the South. This is also due to the fact that Democrats are found in more urban areas, whereas Republicans are found in more suburban areas. This is even true in states that are deep red, such as Texas, or deep blue, such as Massachusetts. The lifestyle for a Democrat or a liberal tends to gravitate towards a more urban area. Highly populous places are concentrated with more minorities, and those minorities will oftentimes vote Democrats. When it comes to gender and marital statuses, Democrats tend to have a significant advantage with women. This is due to the fact that 37% of women tend to vote Democrat, whereas 24% are Republicans. The marital status of someone also impacts which party they will vote for. Unmarried women are more susceptible to vote Democrat 62% of the time. Married women tend to be very evenly split between their parties. However, for LGBTQ populations, they vote Democrat 70% of the time. As for income, the likelihood of being a Democrat decreases with every dollar earned. So 63% of Democratic voters earn less than $15K per year, and this range goes up to $50K, and then more Republicans start influxing in with the cash earned. 36% of Republicans earn more than $200,000 per year. And as for labor, 82% of Democrats support labor unions and believe they are necessary to protect the worker rights. And 43% of Republicans agree with this. However, it's obvious that the Democrats feel more strongly about this. As for age, the youth is becoming more populous in support for Democrats, and Republicans tend to be older. For the race, Democrats are more diverse, whereas 87% of Republicans are white men. So this is a tweet made by President Donald Trump, and I use this as my case study. In this tweet he wrote, "So interesting to see progressive Democrat congresswomen who originally came from countries whose governments are a complete and total catastrophe, the worst, most corrupt, and inept anywhere in the world, if they even have a functioning government at all now, loudly." So Donald Trump is from the Republican Party, and he was making a tweet going against the liberals or the Democrats. And in this tweet, he expressed many stereotypes. This is regarding the demographics, and the demographics also influence stereotypes. Since Republican parties do mainly consist of white men, they don't really understand cultures of other countries, or they have not been exposed to it. Donald Trump is just generalizing this congresswoman as someone from a developing country, even if she's a congresswoman in America and a citizen. He's using his stereotypes to blind his judgment regarding someone from a different party. And he lacks understanding and empathy due to the fact that this woman is from a different party, and because he has varying opinions from hers, he automatically assumes that she's wrong. And in order to build a more understanding environment where the country does make progress, we have to be more accepting of other views. As mentioned before, this country is divided. With the last election in 2016, Donald Trump had gotten 306 electoral college votes, whereas Hillary Clinton got 232. However, if you look over here at the statistic, Hillary Clinton had gotten the popular vote, whereas Donald Trump had not. So the country was very divided, and we could see that division can be fixed with more resistance, tolerance, and participation in order to have a less divided country. With resistance, a Republican could be resistant to the Democratic Party by voting for Republican only, solely for the sake of the party. Rather than this, a Republican or even a Democrat could take into account the actions that another party wants to take and how this could benefit more people, rather than voting strictly for their party just because they're very strong blue. The next step is tolerance. An expression of tolerance is maybe supporting one of another party, as mentioned before, rather than rejecting them due to the fact that he or she is not from the same party. So this goes hand in hand with participation. So people may not agree with the beliefs of a Democrat. However, if there were a presidential election, one may show his or her support of other candidates that are from the liberal side or from the conservative side. This could be by visiting rallies or even asking questions when Republicans or Democrats come into your state or area. So by participating in your local elections, this really could unite your country.
So homelessness has been a very relevant issue in America for a very, very long time. There are over 550,000 homeless people in America, and they are experiencing homelessness. And as you can see on this chart, half the homeless population in America is white. These are the racial trends. 40% is black, 6% is multiracial, and 3% is Native American. The U.S. government has classified a homeless person through the Stuart B. McKinney Homeless Assistance Act by, as you can see, as number 1 is an individual who lacks a fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. So that's basically someone who doesn't have a proper home and a set home. Or number 2 is someone, and as you can see in all these bullet points below, is someone who has a temporary living set up for them. So basically a homeless person is someone who doesn't have regular nighttime residence, or someone who's in temporary housing through however means they can find it. It could be through the government, through welfare things, through just hospitals or mental asylums. So this act was passed in 1987 and allowed for federal law to be instilled in which the federal government had to and is responsible for giving federal money to homeless shelter programs. So trends in homelessness, there's been a general downward trend in homelessness, which is a good thing. It's gone down from 2007 to 2018, because that's the latest statistic they have. It's gone down by 15%, and out of that 15%, the most that has decreased has been the veterans, and that went down by 38%. Family homelessness went down by 23%, which means the whole families that have been homeless as a whole went down by 23%. Chronic homelessness has gone down by 19%. So this has been through, obviously, can be affected by unemployment rates, and is also affected by how much money the government does give to these programs. So geographical trends in homelessness. Generally, there is obviously a trend in homelessness and where it occurs. So it obviously occurs with places who do have higher populations. Just because there are more people, it is obvious that there's going to be more homeless people there. And interestingly enough, the states that have the highest homeless trend, the highest homeless statistics, are the states that have the highest housing costs. And these happen to be the states that actually are on the coast of America. So the ones with the highest are New York and California. They are very, very populated and notoriously expensive. And they all happen to be on coastal regions. And that can also be through migration and other things, but it is just very interesting that the states that have like the most lavish lifestyles and are the most developed are the ones that do have the most homeless populations.
According to a 2018 statistics report, approximately 12.8% of Americans are living with disabilities. Of those people, approximately 7.5 million were between the ages of 18 and 64 and were employed. So as you can see just on this small statistic, lots of Americans are living with disabilities, and lots of them are, the age range differs. They can be either really young or they can be more on the elderly side. So disability can affect everyone of any age. So lots of people with disabilities usually face common problems in their everyday life, whether it be at work, whether it be at school, whether it be at the doctor's office, whatever. So those who are disabled are more likely to live in poverty. This is because it may be harder for them to get a job, which I will tie into my later slides. It can be they can also have a higher chance of being unemployed, which is tied into the first one, depending on the extent of their disability. So lots of disabled people are doing just fine, and they can get jobs with no problems, or very little problems that don't really affect their job. So, however, some people with more serious disabilities may not even be mobile. They might not be able to leave their houses. So therefore, it's going to be a lot harder for them to get a job. Mobility may be limited, and some people may have a shorter life expectancy. These are just some of the common problems that disabled individuals may be facing. Of course, there are hundreds more, but these are just a couple of them. So, stereotypes. Now, we all know what stereotypes are, and of course, they affect every culture that exists within this world. So, some specific stereotypes that apply to people with disabilities include, but are not limited to, they are different from fully human people. A successful handicapped person is thought of as a superhuman, or they live a life of constant sorrow and never-ending sadness and have a very sad life. So as we all know with stereotypes, these are not true. People are not defined by their disabilities, nor are they subjected to any specific stereotype just because they do have a disability. Now, because in the past, before these laws that I'm going to get into were established, many people with disabilities were being discriminated against. Now, being discriminated against with your disability is now considered illegal, which it should be, and this has to go in with Section 504. Section 504 is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities and allows for children with disabilities to participate in school and school activities with any accommodations they may require. So, Section 504 is particularly geared towards children who are going to school and may have disabilities so that they can get the full school experience and be treated fairly like everyone else with proper accommodations they may need, such as having an elevator pass because they're in a wheelchair, or having extra time allotted on a test because they may need it if they have a learning disability. So like I said before, disabilities can affect everyone of any age, any race, culture, doesn't matter. Now, the second law is the Americans with Disabilities Act. This act protects employees from being discriminated based on a disability and prohibits employers from discriminating employees who have disabilities, which means disabled people with disabilities they're granted the opportunity just how anyone else is granted an opportunity. You can put in your resume, you can apply online, you can apply in person, however it may be. You will not be discriminated against thanks to this law just because you have a disability. So, now moving on to disability awareness and fairness. It is important that we treat everyone equally whether they have a disability or not, because in the end, everyone is human, we are all living on this earth together, and we must coexist with one another. Just respect one another because it goes both ways, no matter what physical condition you may have, no matter if you have a disability, no matter if your hair looks like this or that, it doesn't matter. Everyone deserves respect, and having a disability does not change that. Now I'm just going to show you this lovely lady. Her name is Elaine. Just a quick little her backstory. So Elaine has MS, which stands for multiple sclerosis, and she's just basically explaining her life in a wheelchair and how when she found out that she did need a wheelchair, it was a very, very difficult obstacle to overcome because you had just lived most of your life without needing a wheelchair, with walking on your perfectly fine legs. But unfortunately, due to her illness, she eventually needed a wheelchair, and that was very hard to overcome, but she's done it, and she's been doing it for years now, and it just goes to show that people can accomplish anything, they can overcome anything, doesn't matter if you're disabled or not. Thank you.
My topic was LGBTQ and their co-culture, stereotypes in America and all over the world. And what I have presenting here is a chart of the total population of LGBTQ people in America. In America, there's well over 500 million people and growing. And at the moment, at least when this chart was produced, I think it was 2018, so about 2 years ago, 12% of the total population is LGBTQ, which is quite a lot. That's almost 1 out of every 10 people. So that's why they're a very popular culture and a very mainstream thing that's being integrated into our everyday culture and lives in America. 20% of all LGBTQ people are 18 to 34. 12% are from 35 to 51. 7% are from 52 to 71. And 5% are 72 and up. As you can see, there's a trend from the oldest to the youngest, that there's more percentage of LGBTQ population from oldest to youngest. The reason behind that is because as LGBTQ people have become more accepted and more integrated and more protected, of course, there's been more steady increase of LGBTQ people. So these are stereotypes of LGBTQ people. These are quotes. So like one stereotype is all bisexual people are promiscuous. Another stereotype is you can't be queer and religious. A lot of people actually have a friend that's gay and he's Christian, and he hates it when people say that. People constantly ask him, "Are you Catholic? Or what's your religion?" And he'll say, "I'm Catholic." And they'll be like, "You're gay and Catholic?" And he'll be like, "So that doesn't make a big difference." That's a big stereotype, and that's not really that's not what LGBT people are. They're normal people, they can have religions as well. Another stereotype, all lesbians are masculine. That's not true. Yes, there are lesbians that are masculine and quote unquote dykes, but yeah, that's not true at all, and that's another stereotype. Like people will also constantly say that lesbians to lesbians, how come you're not masculine since you like girls? And that's just a big stereotype right there. Another stereotype is all gay men are effeminate and flamboyant. That's really not true, and that's a big stereotype, especially with the gay population we have. People assume because a man is gay, homosexual, that he is more feminine and more flamboyant, and that's a very big stereotype that a lot of people have towards LGBTQ people. Another stereotype is asexual people have no libido. This, I'll be honest with you guys, I personally believe that stereotype at first because of how much I would hear that. I honestly thought it was true. That's how much of a stereotype this is. I personally believed it myself until 2 years ago, until I started doing more recent research. And that's not true at all. So that's how you know it's such a stereotype, because I even believe it myself, because of what I hear so much from like everyday social media and etc. And those are the stereotypes. And of course you got this picture right here, but you don't look queer. One person can look sexuality, and that's not fair. That's just straight up stereotype. You can't look at sexuality, that's something inside you, and that only you know and decide to portray. No one can assume anything. So discrimination and unfair treatment. It's very well known that gay people, lesbian people, and all LGBTQ people have been unfairly treated for almost eternity. There's been ancient accounts that has shown it. It's been well known. I personally, as a child, have seen it myself growing up in middle school, elementary school. It was very odd. It was very odd for someone to be gay, and etc. And it's very well known and very mainstream. It's very there's a lot of stigma behind being LGBTQ people, one of those people. LGBTQ people are one of the most discriminated towards groups in America. And that's very true. People do think it's usually racist. I read a lot of articles about how the majority of surveys find that people think that certain races are discriminated more, but it's actually the most discriminated, the most discriminated group in America, LGBTQ people. 4 in every 10 of LGBTQ people say the community in which they live in is not accepting of them, which is very sad. That's 40% of all LGBTQ people. Basically meaning the homes and communities where people live and grow up and do whatever the most of their lives in are not accepting of who they actually are and as a person naturally of who they are. It's just not, it's not great. It's not great for the person's mental health, for everything. It's just not good. 6 in 10 LGBTQ people experience verbal homophobia abuse. That's very sad. LGBTQ people are less likely to go get jobs when compared to heterosexuals, which is very alarming. That's almost in this day and age of 2019, that shouldn't be a case. But it's very sad for someone's sexuality to affect his whole livelihood and professionalism because of his sexuality. Which is absolutely ridiculous. But that is currently the stats behind LGBTQ people, and that's why they're discriminated and unfairly treated. But on the bright side, there has been a lot of progressive change striving in equality for LGBTQ people. Specifications to what is a hate crime has dramatically expanded. There's been a law passed through the Supreme Court recently. I think it was in October 28, 2009. Same-sex marriage in all states. President Obama had enforced that, and that was a big step. I actually remember personally when I was a kid when that happened. It was a something huge, very big step in terms of creating equality for LGBTQ people. Second parent adoption and joint adoption is another law that was pretty big in terms of progression. And more than half the states have specific LGBTQ non-discrimination protections. It's very specific ones, so like to protect against things that can be like rooted in like freedom of speech and etc. because it's a sensitive topic. And all of this is an example of how the U.S. states are coming together and starting to accept it more as a whole and putting change to it to make it more of an equal thing without any stigma.